Yo, so Blue Tree Harlowe sucks balls. Yeah, not surprising to anyone, as we all know Blue Tree is the worst of Harlowe's skill trees. I've been trying since the game came out to come up with a viable build using the Blue Tree. Specifically, I want to be able to use not only the skill, but spec all the way down into a capstone and be able to kill bosses as well as mob, but killing bosses is the real challenge. I want to be able to kill bosses in a somewhat reasonable amount of time. I experimented with everything trying to make this happen, and this is the best build I could come up with. This is obviously before the increased level cap that should be coming out soon with Cash's release, but this build relies specifically on splash damage. It's one of the very few skills in Harlowe's Blue Tree that actually gives a decent amount of damage, so it relies a lot on that. Yeah, I'll just get into it and show you kind of what this build's about. Alright, this is the skill tree that I'm using for this build. Generally, I spec into every skill that's going to give me as much damage possible for bosses, because this build already does a really good job of mobbing. But the skills are Make Extraordinary, getting you the crit chance on skills. This is essentially your only crit chance in the build, which makes it kind of necessary to go this, but we'll talk a little bit about this in a second. The next one, after triggering or re-triggering an action skill, you get increased gun damage. This is really just, none of these skills really give you good damage. You need damage from something, so we're speccing as much gun damage as we kind of can. And I put 1 point into negative entropy, so I can put 3 into precision engineering, which gives you critical hit damage. Now this, I don't know if this is the optimal way to do it. I did test it in comparison. Instead of throwing 5 points here, I messed around with some points in periodic table flip and some points in cryodynamics just to get some more cryo damage. But the basis of this build is kind of in cryo damage, because we're going to go down into this tree here. But I don't know what's better damage. I just threw on this because 30% crit damage for 3 points is a lot. And although we are speccing 1 into this that we're not really using. And I just kind of use a crit knife to help make bossing a little bit easier when I can. So this is helpful. I don't find this cryo damage or this elemental damage to be giving you that much compared to the crit. So that's what I do. Anyway, I throw 1 point into ripple effect. Now this is where we run into problems, okay? If you want to spec as much damage as possible in the Blue Tree, you basically can't go this left tree. It's just not possible, because all of these 4 skills don't give you any additional damage. There is no additional damage in any of these 4 skills. So you have to invest 10 skill points to get no additional damage for the 1 skill down here that will give you damage. And this skill kind of relies on using this capstone. This capstone means you can have multiple people or multiple mobs in Stasis, and then you get bonus damage based on how many mobs in Stasis you have. But if there's no mobs around, i.e. in a bossing situation, this is giving you nothing. And even when there is mobs around, a lot of the time, you can't keep them held long enough. You can if you spec into all of this stuff. But the damage with mobbing on all the other builds is so good anyway that this becomes kind of useless, because it's not helping you with the one problem that you do have, which is bossing. So it's just not worth all the points to go into this side of the tree. The other side of the tree does have some damage, and you'll see that I have 10 in this skill right here giving me splash damage, which is why you'll see me using all the splash damage weapons, all the explosive weapons, to try and take advantage of the fact that I have 70% splash damage from this 1 skill, including my class mod, of course. But essentially, a similar story on this side of the tree. There's not a lot of damage besides flat damage numbers. So you're getting flat damage here on entangled enemies. Again, not great for single target, but great for AoE, which we have no problem with already. Then you can, whenever you deal splash damage, you can re-trigger the entangle damage, which again is great for AoE. I did test that to see if it re-triggers the entangle damage on the target that you're damaging, and it doesn't seem to do that. I instead took my points out of this and threw them into another skill that I would get into later, and was doing way more damage that way. So this is kind of useless. And again, just some more action skill duration, and you can restore your action skill. So all action skill restore and some flat damage here, but no percentage damage besides this skill. So that's the one that we're speccing into. I throw 5 points in here, and I have 5 for my class mod. Now the middle tree. This is where your damage is. Unfortunately, all of your damage in this tree seems to be tied to cryo. So if you don't like cryo, suck a dick. I don't know what to tell you. This is your main damaging skill. It's a kill skill. You'll note that there's no way to proc kill skills on Harlowe besides actually killing an enemy. So again, when you're mobbing, you kind of need to get kills in order to keep this up to give you that bonus cryo damage. Now, I also spec 4 into this skill, which gives you lifesteal on all of your cryo damage, which is really good for survivability. The only reason why is because, again, there's not really another skill that gives you good damage. You have this one here, which when you freeze an enemy, it creates like a big circle, and that circle does damage over time. But the damage is flat, as you see, 357 per second, and it can go up by a percentage, up to, at max rank, I believe it's 30%. But 30% of the number, it's just not that big and not worth all the points into this, in my opinion. So I spec 1 into this just because it gives me a chance to freeze, which is fun. I don't know, it's fun to see mobs freezing and being able to shoot them and stuff, but not necessary. You can throw 5 in to keep ice on that if you want. And then you get 1 point and a triple point. Again, it's giving you some more bonus damage. It's not that much. This tree just sucks for single target damage, which is why it's so hard to create a viable build using this tree. And that's why I kind of rely on the class mod that gives me the this splash damage to make it a whole lot easier. My goal with this build, as I said, was to be able to use a blue tree capstone. I did play around with all the capstones, and they are really fun. Like going into this and slamming enemies down on the ground, and the explosion gets bigger and bigger, and you just spec all into action skill duration, and it just becomes a nuke by the end of it. The problem with this is that oftentimes when you kill an enemy, your action skill is supposed to go and find another enemy to throw into stasis. But the range on this, or the tracking on this, is really bad, that even when there's enemies around, it often doesn't find another enemy. So even though you have action skill duration left, it just kind of doesn't find another enemy, so you can't chain this very well, which is really unfortunate. Another unfortunate part of going the blue tree. Unfortunately. Say that again. All right. That's the blue tree side of things. And then, of course, to maximize your value on blue tree Harlowe, you have to go into either of the good trees. We're going green tree here. Again, I throw points into this, which gives me some crit damage. It's just none of these are going to give me any damage. Maybe this one gives you bonus status effect chance to entangled enemies, or I don't know. This might proc your cryo damage a little better, but we go the crit damage because we need single target damage for this build to work. And again, no damage here. You have cryo efficiency, but this, I tested a full cryo efficiency freezing build with absolute 0 to keep your action skill up all the time. But again, my action skill would still bug out and it wouldn't reset onto nearby mobs. And the cryo efficiency actually didn't make it efficient at all. So I couldn't freeze enemies with cryo weapons very easily. So to me, that just wasn't worth it. So anyway, I went full damage. Whenever you irradiate an enemy, you get increased gun damage. Now this kind of also bugs out, but I'll talk about that in a second. Next, creative overflow, giving you increased gun damage the more overshield you have, and you're getting a lot of that overshield from this skill here, giving you that lifesteal with the cryo damage you're doing. And then finally, 2 points into confirmative reality. This just makes it so you can keep your action skill up as long as possible. And then those 3 points, I did try throwing in a domino effect. I threw into, of course, decoherence, one of your best skills on Harlowe. You just deal bonus damage to entangled enemies. So it's really important to keep enemies entangled to deal damage. Now, the point of this build, again, was to use the blue action skill. So you want to use the stasis action skill, and we want to use a capstone. So we're using this capstone because this is the one that we spec into for the most damage. And then you can look at your augments. Now, the best augment for bossing is probably this one. Entangled enemies take bonus radiation damage from entangle. Now this, they just take bonus radiation damage when they're entangled. Was a little confused on if it's only the share entangle damage that's bonus. It's not. They just take bonus radiation damage. So it's a bonus 25% radiation damage. Now, this skill over here, as I said, when you radiate enemies, you get gun damage. Unfortunately, this bonus radiation damage cannot irradiate enemies. I don't know why. So if you do want to actually get use out of this skill at all, you kind of have to use a radiation weapon, which kind of sucks because in a perfect world, we can use all cryo weapons on this build, as the cryo damage will get amped further by this skill here. Granted, it's an additional 15%, so it's not that much, but it is something. And note that this does only proc when enemies are entangled. So they do need to be entangled to deal that damage. So when you're bossing, you have to make sure that the enemy that you're shooting is entangled, so you get this 25% bonus damage, and you get this 15% or 30% if you're doing cryo. Now the other augment that I like to use is this one here. Because you're speccing so much into splash damage, your slams do a lot of damage, and this ups it by an additional 100%, which is really, really strong. So your slams will just one-shot people, and then each time you do, they fire out these little pockets that deal cryo and radiation. Note, this radiation damage can irradiate enemies, so you can actually proc this skill here with that if you're a little lucky, but I wouldn't rely on that. Now, this skill is new. This is part of kind of the Blue Tree, quote, rework, where this skill used to be when you kill an enemy in stasis, the stasis automatically puts another enemy in stasis, but that became an inherent part of the Blue Tree as per the Harlowe buffs. Now, I did theorize with this augment because it says each time you slam an enemy, you get increased status effect damage and increased status effect chance until the end of stasis. So in theory, you can make a full action skill duration build where you're just slamming enemies and stacking that status effect damage and status effect chance. Again, the problem with this is even when there's mobs around, the stasis has a hard time finding those new mobs to put into stasis in order to keep this action skill going. So it is really tricky to do. Anyway, this is the build that I thought works the best. I like using this one for mobbing and this one for bossing. And you can just switch kind of mid thing, assuming you're playing single player. If you're playing multiplayer, just go hide in a corner quick or whatever. But this is what I found to be the most damage I can get out of the Blue Tree build while still speccing all the way down to a capstone. Now with that splash damage, we'll talk about gear here. I use airstrike just for the more splash damage. I use a third point. You can maybe find other firmware that give you better that give you better damage overall, but this is the one that I used. I don't really notice the missile strike, but honestly I have that in tandem with a fireworks, so when I'm going around, I just see missiles flying everywhere and automatically killing things from my slam damage kind of things flying around. It's kind of an AFK mobbing build where you can just stasis an enemy, slam him into the ground, it'll find someone else, and as it does that, as that enemy dies, it's going to release fireworks, it's going to release an airstrike, etc., etc. I'm also using 2 in Skillcraft. I don't know why I did firmware first, but I did, so that's how we're doing it, I guess. I have a bunch of splash damage weapons. So the ones that I'm using that I really like are the linebacker and the lead balloon. Now, the lead balloon I always thought was pretty cheeks. I thought it was pretty bad because it drops from splash zone. But if you get it with the secondary dataless, it's not bad. While noting that we are spec'd into a shit ton of splash damage, so that is really nice. Now for gear, I just have a kill spring for survivability because all of this is splash damage. You can hit yourself and you can kill yourself quite easily. I found one with splash damage on it, so that's really nice that I get bonus splash damage for 8 seconds. It's a good amount of time, so something I can take advantage of. I'm using a crit knife. You know, it's just impossible not to use everything at your disposal. in order to kill bosses, and so this gives me that crit chance that I need in order to kind of take advantage of the crit damage I'm getting from this skill here and from this skill down here. So that's something. For my class mod, I'm using a Skeptic. This helps with, again, when you slam, it's shooting out more shit, and just things are flying over this all over the screen, and that, I don't know, that hits some dopamine in the back of my brain, and that's really fun. So I like that. I also really like Stun Lock, because what Stun Lock does is when you do crit an enemy or headshot them or whatever, and it does put them into that temporary stasis bubble, they become entangled. So if you need to get your action skill back, you entangle that enemy, and what that means is you deal bonus damage to that enemy, but then you also can proc confirmative reality on them, meaning you can start getting your cooldown back a little bit faster, which is really nice. And of course, this also can roll with 5 points into the splash damage skill. What's that called? Indiscrete math. Giving you 70%, excuse me, splash damage as opposed to 35, which is kind of where I'm trying to get most of my damage from in this build. So while editing this, I discovered that the Scientist is also a really good class mod to use because it gives 35% splash damage as its base bonus. So you don't have to really farm as much because you'll see here splash damage is the consistent bonus. This one has crit damage and this one has elemental damage. But what it also does is whenever you shock an enemy, it irradiates that enemy and entangles them, which you get a lot of your bonus damage based on entangling enemies. It also shoots out electrical shocks that will shock other enemies, thus irradiating them, giving you that bonus gun damage from that skill that we were talking about. And this could just be a really good alternative. It's probably higher in the single target damage, so it's another class mod to try out. But in terms of which one's better versus the splash damage one or this one, it's really personal preference. It's just the Scientist will be way easier to farm because you get 35% splash damage flat, whereas this you have to roll 5 points in the splash damage skill to get that same 35%. But besides that, the other skills aren't really giving you much damage, so it's just personal preference. Anyway, I thought I'd mention it. Anyway, for the shield, I use a Fireworks, but when I'm bossing, I switch over to a Watts for Dinner. You know, you can kind of use whichever one you want. Obviously you want to try and get Siphon and Amp on a Watts for Dinner because that's the most broken shield in the game probably. And yeah, anyway, finally, this is my last thing, the enhancement. So I saw this interaction with the what's it called? Where is it? The Shalashaska. This weapon is OP as fucking, this shit is broken, but on a different build, and Moxie posted that build and I messed around with it, and this shit is so broken it's disgusting. But basically the idea is that it uses this head ringer at the top there, that head ringer effect on enhancements, where guns with Torg licensed parts get 25% damage and 100% damage radius. So that affects the linebacker, meaning that this shit becomes huge and it's really easy to hit all of the explosions all on one enemy, and it makes your damage really, really big. For this gun, it kind of does a different interaction where when you're critting, it ricochets, and it ricochets off of the enemy and hits the floor. But with this, it can, like, that explosion on the floor still hits the same enemy, so it basically multiplies your damage on one enemy. But that's that one. That one's super broken. Unfortunately, this one's not as broken, but it's the same idea. With the extra radius, all of the exploding projectiles on the ground are a lot easier to hit on one target, so that's really nice. Same thing here. This shit just hits from so far away with this. Like, the radius is insane. This is just the one that I have. It also comes with the Torg sticky magazine thing, which helps because when I'm bossing on Bloomreaper, which I'll show and you'll see, or I've already shown, I don't know. I do use this for bossing when things get sticky, because obviously this is the best weapon in the game. It's the most damage, and it's still not that great on this build. Unfortunately, it just goes to show you how hard it is to make a build viable using just the blue tree. Finally, specializations. Ideally, I have enough points in this to go this. I'm too lazy to respec and don't want to spend iridium, so I'm like 3 levels away, so I want to farm it and get this. But this is the one you want. It does damage based on how you do extra damage based on how full your shield is, and you can keep your shield so full because of all that lifesteal off the cryo damage, which is great. The next one is this. We're gonna use this, of course. More gun damage. You just want more damage, and then I would probably stick with these two here. This one gives you your action skill damage benefits from your gun damage. So as you're getting more gun damage, it helps with your action skill. It's just fun for when you're throwing mobs around and slamming them and shit. And then your action skill can critically strike. Anything that gives you crit chance, we kind of need. We don't have a lot of ways to crit in this build, so we need all the ways we can crit possible, and this is one of them. And that is pretty much the build. Alright, so here's just some footage of this build in action. I'm fighting Bloomreaper here in UVH 6. Surprisingly, with the linebacker and all the splash damage, it's actually really good at taking out the crystals at the beginning of the fight. It does it quite a bit better than some other builds. I mean, it's not perfect. It's still a Blue Tree Harlowe build, but it is better than I expected. The problem comes when you get rid of the crystals, like I just did there, which was actually pretty quick for this build. My damage, even using a bod and crit knives, is just kind of mid, as you can see, so it's not very good. But like I said, the mobbing is a lot of fun. This build isn't meant to be like the best build. Obviously, it's a Blue Tree Harlowe build, but I wanted to be able to use this this skill tree. I wanted to be able to use the capstone and the action skill and still be able to get through the game and enjoy myself. So that was the goal behind making this build, and I think that I succeeded at that, so I'm pretty happy with that. Anyway, that's really all I have for you. I'm just leaving you with some footage here, but I appreciate you watching. If you did watch this long, this video was way longer than I had anticipated it to be, but there were just so many different things that I was trying out and exploring on Blue Tree Harlowe that I learned that I wanted to share, so here it is. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you leave me a like, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.